upon a time there lived a king by the name of Judah. He and his wife had two royal sons named and Onan. Married well and was next in line to inherit the throne of the land, but was wicked in the eyes of the Lord, so God struck him dead. Worried that the royal bloodline could die, Judah advised Onan, "Go unto thy brother's wife, and marry her, and raise up seed to thy brother." So Onan married his brother's wife, but was perturbed that the seed should not be his. So on his wedding night, when Onan made ready to have sex with his wife, he quickly ducked into the bathroom, and there he spilled his seed upon the ground, lest that he should give the seed to his brother. Masturbation displeased the Lord so much that God decided to slay him as he had with Meanwhile, back in ancient Greece, Zeus was planting his seed far and wide. If it had a pulse and it could walk, then chances were Zeus was humping it. Nymph, mortal, or goddess, it didn't matter to him. No woman of any kind in the world was safe from Zeus's lust. Now, man was expected to live to a higher standard. Sexual discretion was the order of the day as far as mortals were concerned. Needless to say, not everyone was happy with this glaringly obvious double standard. Even the great poet Homer had moments where he questioned his own faith due to the Olympians' naughty behavior. He sometimes found it difficult to understand why people were expected to honor and worship these beings. Of course, he would never say that right to the gods' faces. Not even Zeus's wife Hera would confront her husband regarding his moral depravity in such a manner. Now, make no mistake, Hera did not approve of Zeus's philandering. But rather than blame Zeus, Hera would always go after the women he had been with. And it really didn't matter to Hera whether the woman pursued Zeus or he pursued the woman. There were times he actually raped them, but that didn't mean anything to Hera. And if a woman had a child with Zeus, that child would wind up a target of Hera's rage and wrath as well. Such was the case when the hero Heracles was born. Hera sent 2 deadly serpents into the baby's crib to kill him. To her horror, the seemingly helpless newborn strangled the 2 snakes in record time and killed them. From that moment on, all the world knew he would grow up to be someone special. But we'll get into that some other time. Although, speaking of Heracles and other Greek heroes, men born of mortal women and immortal, well, for lack of a better word, immortal men, these immortal men were perhaps referenced in the Old Testament of the Bible. Now, the ancient Greeks and ancient Jews didn't have anything in common, really, but they certainly had business dealings with each other, they traded with each other, and they knew of each other. The book of Genesis mentions the sons of God descending into our world and procreating with mortal women. In the eyes of the ancient Jews, the children born of the sons of God and mortal women would have been the likes of Heracles, Perseus, Jason, and Theseus, just to name a few. Early Christians believed the sons of God, referenced in Genesis, were clearly demons, fallen angels. Now, in the Jewish faith, evil is seen as too abstract a concept, so fallen angels don't exist in Judaism as they do in Christianity and Islam. In the Jewish faith, the sons of God were seen as men who possessed divine power by means of astrological knowledge, but I digress. Back to ancient Greece. One of Zeus's sexual conquests was the nymphomaniac wood nymph Metis. Sexually addicted as she was, she saw nothing great about sleeping with the king of the gods, not after so many before her had done so already. Zeus's desire for her grew every second of every minute of every hour. The Fates even tried to intervene here by paying him a visit one day. They tried to warn him that if he were to have a son with Metis, that son would overthrow him the way he had overthrown his own father. And yet the mighty god was undaunted and continued to chase Metis to the 4 corners of the world. She tried changing herself into a cat to avoid him. He turned himself into a cat as well. She turned herself into a hawk, soaring higher and higher into the heavens. Again, he did the same. Finally, she gave in, and after she took the longest shower in history trying to erase the memory of this sexual encounter, she discovered that she was pregnant. Her heart was now filled with joy, for the one-night stand she most regretted had planted the seed that would be his own undoing. She decided she would go straight to Zeus with the great news and rub his nose in it. Metis, like most nymphs, was very much into metaphors, so she went to Olympus in the form of a fly.
What better way to give him the news than literally going before him as a fly in his ointment?
She thought to herself. But the clouds witnessed Metis' transformation and decided to warn Zeus what she had done. So when a fly began buzzing around his head, he knew immediately who it was, and he swallowed her whole, digesting and apparently killing the nymph in the process. And all was well in Zeus's world once again. Or so he thought. A few hours after swallowing Metis, Zeus came down with a pounding headache, and just like Zeus's lust, the pounding and throbbing pain just got worse and worse every second of every minute of every hour. He had finally had as much as he could bear, and he called for Hephaestus. "Son, I have a splitting headache. Please get out your chisel and your hammer. I need you to crack my skull open, and hopefully then the pain will go away." Hephaestus was shocked, saying, "But Pop, that's crazy talk." Still, the chief god insisted, and his son did as he was asked. He took his chisel and his hammer, and he split Zeus's skull open just above the temple, and out from Zeus's head popped a fully dressed Athena, goddess of arts and culture. Yes, Zeus had given birth to his own daughter. This would not be the last time Zeus gave birth to one of his own children. There was also Dionysus, the youngest of the Olympians. Zeus had met a mortal princess named Semele, and now when the gods came down to earth, they disguised themselves because man could not look upon a god or goddess in all their glory without it killing them. And so Zeus was in disguise when he met Semele, but for some reason he decided to tell her who he was right from the get-go. He was having kind of a braggadocious moment there. "I am Zeus. What's your sign?" Hera, as always, knew of her husband's infidelity, and one day she decided to go visit her human rival disguised as an old woman. She knocked at Semele's kitchen door asking,
"Can I borrow a cup of sugar?"
Semele invited her in and ordered the servants to make them a nice lunch. The two women talked for hours. Hera then noticed Semele was pregnant, and her blood began to boil.
"Tell me, dear, who is the father?"
And so Princess Semele told Hera,
"Oh, it's so awesome. I'm dating Zeus, the king of the gods. Couldn't you just plot?"
Hera began laughing.
"Many men claim to be Zeus, dear. When he comes home tonight, make him prove who he is. Make him show you himself in all his godly glory."
Hera then left, barely able to keep up the charade of being a sweet old lady any longer. That night, Zeus went to Semele for a quickie. She told him she'd only have sex with him if he'd let her see him in all his glory as the mighty thunder god. Zeus said no, but Semele kept insisting, so he finally gave in and revealed himself. He was 10 times brighter than the sun itself. Within seconds, Semele burst into flames and died. Zeus was able to save her unborn fetus, though, and he sewed the fetus inside his leg. 9 months later, baby Dionysus burst from said leg. The ancients didn't really understand biology as well as we do today. They didn't have microscopes that could watch sperm. They had no way of knowing that in every single ejaculation there are millions of sperm cells. Most of these will die regardless of where they end up. They could end up in Onan's wife or on the floor of his bathroom. Makes no difference. Most are not going to survive. Period. But the ancients, having no way of understanding this, believed that semen was a living organism destined to become a baby. It just needed to find a suitable place to dwell. The woman's womb tended to be a good place because it could feed off whatever its mother was eating and grow into a healthy baby boy or girl from there. The ancients didn't realize conception begins when a man's sperm successfully fertilizes a woman's, Hence, in a lot of myths, women aren't really a necessity to childbirth. Cronus's testicles are thrown out into the sea, and white foam begins to bubble up from where they landed. As ocean creatures feed on the Titan's genitals, they free his semen, which in turn feeds off the oceanic creatures. The semen then grows and grows before emerging from the white foam as the goddess Aphrodite. Today we have heated debates as to whether life begins at conception or at birth. In the ancient world, there was no question here. Life began at the moment a guy shot his load. Back then, when Onan masturbated, it was basically the equivalent of killing a newborn baby. Even wet dreams were a no-no back then. And let's face facts. The less one jerks off, the more likely they are to ejaculate in their sleep. So here you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. The ancients' views on life beginning at ejaculation helped shape the rather puritanical moral teachings found in Leviticus. Thou shalt not lie with mankind as with womankind. It is abomination. Leviticus doesn't condemn lesbian activity. It's very male-centric, as much of the laws of the Bible are. This is due to the fact that women couldn't produce semen. So, as long as a woman didn't give a man oral sex or consent to be penetrated anally, she was pretty much in the clear. This male primacy was shared by just about every culture in the world at that time. Fertility cults in Egypt and Ireland alike had their most sacred rituals revolving around phallic imagery. For example, during the Feast of Beltane, people would dance around an erect maypole. Not exactly a subtle image there. There was far more emphasis on the male genitalia than women's. Semen was such a sacred substance in Egypt that the people believed all life came about when the supreme god got aroused one day and shot his load. Now, in many pagan cultures, the erect phallus was considered an extremely sacred symbol, but when you went into the Roman Greco world, they preferred a flaccid phallus because they associated the erect phallus with the barbarians and the Goths that they were always at war with. And that's kind of the reason why Leviticus forbid Jewish men from shaving or cutting their hair. It was a way to differentiate themselves from the pagans that they were oftentimes at war with. So the Jewish culture was based more on modesty and discretion because the Greeks and the Romans and just about all the other pagans at that time were running around naked and worshipping, well, naughty parts. Even in some cultures today, people still view semen as a sacred source of masculine power. Many practitioners of Buddhism, Taoism, and Hinduism still view semen as an essential element of human physiology. And many Catholics still agree with some of the moral code of conduct found in Leviticus to this day. Premarital sex, gay sex, and masturbation are all considered to be grave sins against chastity. Pope John Paul II reaffirmed this point of view in his Catechism of the Catholic Church in 1995. And as absurd as the views of our ancestors may seem to those outside of the church, those theories were perfectly reasonable conclusions to be made at the time with the information mankind had available. Even the great thinkers of the day bought into this line of thought. Aristotle, who is held in great esteem by people even today, believed the story of Zeus giving birth to his own daughter was scientifically feasible. He even went so far as to label women dysfunctional men, since they couldn't produce sperm. This also was one of the reasons he theorized women didn't even possess souls. They were that much less of a creation in his eyes. Now, due to the outdated nature of the stories of Athena and Onan, does that mean we should just discard them altogether? Or could these two myths still teach us a little something today? In both tales, we are presented with a king. In both tales, the king is corrupted when he puts his own needs ahead of the needs of his subjects. In both tales, the king risks everything for the sake of his own vanity and massive royal-sized ego. Hell, one of them even dies. Zeus is definitely the luckier of the two, because, of course, he doesn't die, but he still gets knocked up. And not only does he go through the pain of childbirth, but he risks being overthrown and losing all of his power if the child he bears turns out to be a boy. The moral we can take from both of these stories is that political leaders have a responsibility to the people they are supposed to be serving. If they fail to listen to the voice of the people or to act out on their own passions rather than listen to reason, they very well could face a future of failure and destruction. See? The birth of Athena and the tale of how Onan shot his load are really stories with a heavy political message strongly endorsing democracy. Okay, maybe not. Maybe. I don't know.